In 1325, one of the most ridiculous wars in history broke out in Italy. Its cause was an ordinary wooden bucket. Imagine two proud medieval republics, Bologna and Modena, clashed to the death over a stolen piece of kitchenware. This story began long before the conflict itself. Northern Italy was then split by the feud between the Guelphs and the Ghibellines.
We must reject their ultimatum.
Bologna supported
Bologna
the Pope
will
and the
not
Guelphs.
yield to the emperor.
Modena sided with the Holy Roman Emperor and the Ghibellines. The cities had hated each other for centuries. Constant skirmishes, raids, and cattle rustling were business as usual for them. But the spark that ignited the flame of full-scale war was a ridiculously petty reason. It all happened in hot July of 1325. A squad of daredevils from Modena secretly sneaked into Bologna itself. In broad daylight, in the main square, they stole an oak bucket from a city well and escaped unpunished. The bucket was old, battered, and had no material value whatsoever. It was a pure, unadulterated insult. Humiliated Bologna demanded the immediate return of its relic.
They have insulted
In those
Bologna.
days, such a theft
Bring
was
it
a
back from
challenge that could
Modena.
only be washed away with blood.
To the brave cowards of Bologna.
The Modenese, fueled by their success, just laughed in response. They categorically refused to return the trophy. The enraged magistrate of Bologna declared war. 30,000 infantry and 2,000 knights rallied to the banners. It was a huge army by medieval standards. Bologna didn't just want the bucket back, it wanted to annihilate Modena. Modena had far fewer resources. The city could field only 7,000 warriors, a pitiful handful against the Armada. It seemed Modena's fate was sealed. However, the Modenese were experienced fighters and had no intention of surrendering. They sent out scouts and began exhausting the clumsy Bolognese army with daring cavalry hit-and-runs. The decisive battle took place on November 15, 1325, near the castle of Zappolino. The Bolognese army was slowly approaching, silhouetted against the setting sun. The Bolognese wore luxurious armor and were confident in their overwhelming numbers. Their formation seemed unbreakable. The Modenese army stood on a hill, ready to fight to the last man. They knew every fold of the terrain. The Modenese commander ordered an attack first. It was a desperate, reckless, and genius move. The narrow valley didn't allow the Bolognese to use their full numerical advantage. The large army simply got stuck, turning into a mob. The Modenese cavalry struck the flank like a hot knife through butter. Panic set in. The Bolognese fled, throwing away their weapons and banners. 7,000 routed 32. It was one of the greatest humiliations in Bologna's military history. The losses were huge. Over 1,500 Bolognese lay dead on the battlefield. The Modenese, on the other hand, suffered almost no casualties. The victors didn't try to capture Bologna. Instead, they staged a mocking parade right under the walls of the defeated city. The height of cynicism was the capture of a second relic. They stole a large lock from Bologna's port, and the bucket itself remained in Modena. To humiliate the enemy as much as possible, the Modenese held a nightly tournament right in full view of the Bolognese garrison. A peace treaty humiliating for Bologna was soon signed. Under its terms, the bucket forever became the property of Modena. So a senseless theft turned into a bloody battle that claimed thousands of lives. The price of the bucket turned out to be incredibly high. But what was this bucket? Legend says it was a simple oak vessel for drawing water. However, some historians believe it wasn't just a container. The bucket could have served as a ballot box or a symbol of power. That very bucket is kept in Modena to this day in the Ghirlandina Tower. It hangs on a chain from the very ceiling of the hall. Thousands of tourists come to see the cause of one of the most curious
Incredible
wars
to
in the
think that's the
history of
real one.
mankind. However, modern research has revealed a curious detail. There are actually two buckets in the tower, and they are not quite identical. The second bucket is a backup. The city authorities of Modena value the symbol so much that they created a copy in case of theft.
After all, the Bolognese might now try to get their shameful trophy back. Jokes about the bucket are still not appreciated in Bologna. Interestingly, this absurd war wasn't just a simple brawl of hooligans. It had serious political consequences. The defeat of Bologna undermined the Pope's position in the region and strengthened the emperor's influence. The bucket became a tool of geopolitics. The defeat was so crushing that Bologna forgot about military ambitions for many years, focusing on trade instead. Modena, on the contrary, forever secured the status of a city capable of standing up for its honor. This story inspired poets. Alessandro Tazzoni wrote a mock-heroic poem, The Stolen Bucket, in the 17th century. The poem ridicules feudal wars and human stupidity. It is thanks to literature that the story gained worldwide fame. The War of the Bucket became the perfect metaphor for the senselessness of conflicts started because of wounded egos. Think about it. Almost 2,000 people died because of an item that cost pennies. It's almost a biblical parable. There are still debates about whether the bucket was the real cause or just a spark for a long brewing conflict. Most scholars agree. The war would have started anyway. But without the bucket, it wouldn't have become a legend. We will never know for sure whether the Modenese raid was a spontaneous prank or a planned special operation. One thing is clear. This audacity entered the textbooks on tactics. 7,000 warriors destroyed an army 4 times their size. The secret of victory was terrain and surprise. The Bolognese were so confident of winning that they didn't even bother with reconnaissance. The Modenese knights were hardened by endless border clashes. They knew how to fight, not just show off at parades. The paradox is that the War of the Bucket took place in one of the most brutal eras, full of much larger battles. But the memory of those grandiose battles has faded, while the story of the bucket lives on. Why? Because it is unique.
The good news is, the French think
It shows
we have
that
a
even in the
larger
bloody
army.
Middle
Bad
Ages,
news,
there was room for
they're
human
about to find out we're
stupidity
just
and
12
dark
dynamic
humor.
idiots and a very tired goat.
If you ever find yourself in Modena, be sure to climb the Ghirlandina Tower. There's a special, slightly ironic atmosphere there. When you look at this old wooden bucket, you are not looking at trash. You are looking at a monument to egocentrism. Every year on the anniversary of the battle, the people of Modena remember that victory with legitimate pride and a smile. And in Bologna, they prefer to keep tactfully silent. This historical trauma has never quite fully healed.
But Professor, did they manage to get
Jokes
the
like,
bucket back from
"How's the
Modena?
bucket?" can still cause irritation in the academic circles of Bologna. History teaches us, if you decide to steal another city's symbol, be prepared for 30,000 warriors to come after you. But if you manage to fight them off while outnumbered, legends will be told about you for another 700 years. The War of the Bucket has also spawned a lot of conspiracy theories. Some believe that gold was hidden inside the bucket. Others claim it was a cover operation to capture important documents. But the truth is much more mundane. It's a struggle for honor, mixed with old hatred, seasoned with the hot blood of Southerners. After almost 7 centuries, no one can explain how an ordinary wooden object managed to survive so many centuries. The wood should have rotted, but the artifact stands as good as new. Restoration or a miracle?
In the end,
Let's end this story
only
with
the
the
earth
wisdom that
remains.
this war gave us.
peace is the only
Never
true
underestimate your opponent, no matter how small they may seem. And remember, sometimes the most insignificant little thing can become a reason for events that change the fate of states. People of the Middle Ages lived by
This cloth
passion.
is my honor,
For
spun
them,
true.
honor was more precious
We
than
walk
gold,
with heads held high.
and a symbol more valuable than human life.
On this field,
now,
thousands
the
of
war
brave
the
souls
bucket
fell.
Sounds like a joke.
All for the sake of a
But for
stolen
those who
wooden
fell
bucket.
at Zappolino,
Talk about
it was harsh
overreacting to a
reality.
prank.
We look at this story with a smile precisely because the sword of medieval feud is not hanging over us. But if you think about it, many modern conflicts start exactly the same way, with a trifle, wounded pride, and an old bucket. On this ironic note, we end our story. Take care of your buckets and value peace.